Hello, this is a guide for the Mercenary Ryde. I'll be going over how the Mercenary works, how to build them, and most importantly how to use them. Ryde is an Exalted Rare supporter with specific classification of her being a bait support. Ryde supports the next ally with her AoE tiles being a 5x5 box. I'll now talk about her skills at max rank. Her first skill is named Ryde's Domain. After Ryde supports an ally, she'll apply the Soul Disturbance magic debuff to all enemies which cannot be ignored. Ryde can do this a total of 4 times in a single battle. The Soul Disturbance magic debuff reduces the enemy's defense and increases their incoming damage. Her second skill is named Go Swiftblade. This skill gives Ryde dot immunity and a bit of barrier. Additionally, whenever Ryde is attacked by an enemy, she fights back and performs a counter attack against them, dealing an instance of direct damage at skills of her max HP and support stat, and an instance of defense barrier ignoring damage at skills of her max HP and the amount of Soul Disturbance magic the enemy has. However, I should note that Ryde's counter attack damage is not affected by return effects, or in other words, cannot be reflected back to her. Her third skill is named Blood Blossom Full Bloom. This is Ryde's most important skill, what makes her unbelievably strong. When Ryde supports an ally, she'll apply them with a Blood Blossom buff. Ryde can do this a total of 4 times in a single battle. When a Mercenary with the Blood Blossom buff receives fatal damage, they're instead put on 1 HP. However, unlike other Immortality effects such as Indra's Immortality or Belial's Immortality, Ryde's Immortality is not removed upon activation. In other words, Ryde gives Mercenaries invincibility. This is why Ryde is very busted. I should note that defenders cannot receive Ryde's Immortality effect, and you cannot extend her Immortality effect through buff reset skill types. Her fourth skill is named Offensive Stats Bestowal. When Ryde supports an ally, she increases their attack, crit damage, and crit rate. For my recommendations to what skill level Ryde should be, since she's Exalted Mercenary makes it so she works completely fine at +0. However, some notable skill spikes are +1 as it increases the number of times she can bestow her Immortality from 2 to 3, +3 as it increases the duration of her Immortality from 10 to 11 turns, her +6 as it increases the number of turns she can bestow her Immortality from 3 to 4, and finally her +9 is her strongest skill spike as it maxes out the duration of her Immortality from 11 to 13 turns. I think you see a pattern here. In my opinion, I would recommend you to get Ryde's skill level to at least +1 as the difference between bestowing your Immortality from twice to thrice is quite a huge upgrade for how cheap it is. If you want to get more skill levels on her, I would highly recommend getting her +9 as it will completely max out the power of her Immortality. And lastly, don't upgrade her to +10. The upgrade is not powerful enough to warrant an investment into. For runes, the optimal setup would be to run 2 HP% runes, both with a subset of flat HP. Additionally, both runes should be at minimum 6-star runes with an Epic Plus rarity, as well as their stats being equal to or higher than the ones presented on screen. For a Mythic rune, the optimal setup would be to run 2 HP% main stats with a subset of HP%. Though don't worry if you don't have this subset, it's not make or break. For Insignia of Creed, I wouldn't recommend getting them as it's quite expensive, 900 diamonds per slot, and insignias aren't necessary for her to perform well. However, if you do have the diamonds to burn, then insignia should be the following: Star Guardian, Frostbear's Leather, Lucky Charm, 1000-year Training, and for the last slot, any of the following works. For Silgi, I would highly recommend leveling them all up to level 10 for that one additional skill level, as Exalted skill books are kinda hard to come by. If you want, you could also upgrade her Amulet to level 25 for that additional HP boost, and lastly, if you do upgrade her Amulet to level 25, I would highly recommend refining her Amulet stats to be double HP%. For rank boosting Ryde, I would highly recommend it as it would not only increase her support power, but also increase her HP. Ryde's main and really only purpose is to provide an incredibly powerful Immortality buff to the team. For PvP formations, Ryde is flexible enough to work in either a mage team or a warrior team. Now for pros and cons. For pros, Ryde has incredible AoE tiles. Her 5x5 allows her to easily buff almost the entire team, giving them her incredible Immortality skill. This also makes her very simple and easy to use. Another pro of Ryde is that her counterattack actually deals a decent amount of damage. You'll sometimes see her one-shot a Slayer every now and then. But honestly, if I were to sum it up, the best part of Ryde is her Immortality buff. It's so ridiculously strong as it's essentially a 13-turn invincibility to all your allies. Additionally, due to it being so strong, it forces your opponent to respond via nullifiers, CC effects, or using the Viper spellcard on Ryde, since if they don't respond, they'll, simply lose the fight. However, some cons are that her first skill, Ryde's Domain, doesn't apply a strong enough defense reduction to be worth playing around. It simply isn't enough to reduce the defense of enemies blessed by Ida. Another con of Ryde is her counterattack. Even though I mentioned that she deals a surprising amount of damage, her counterattack is still not really worth playing around, since you kinda have to just pray that the enemy hits her and dies. Overall, don't rely on Ryde to be a Slayer, but at the same time, don't forget that she has a counterattack. You don't want to be taken by surprise in Guild War. The biggest con of Ryde is, thankfully, the counterplay to her Immortality. This is because her Immortality is countered by nullifiers removing them, buff prohibition preventing its application, and the Viper spell card cutting down on how many Mercenaries receive her buffs. All 3 of these counters essentially shut down Ryde's whole purpose, making her completely useless. More miscellaneous cons of Ryde's Immortality is that defenders cannot receive her Immortality, and her Immortality maxes out at a very expensive +9 skill level. And lastly, Ryde is vulnerable to CC effects, which puts her in danger of being cheesed out by Dalvi's or Claudia's Charm. Therefore, you have to be quite careful about her positioning to not get pranked. It may seem like Ryde has a lot of cons, but honestly, her Immortality is so ridiculously, flabbergastingly, ludicrously strong that it overrides most of her problems. To put in perspective, here's the other pros and cons list I made. I know this looks really stupid, but I really just want to send the message of how crazy powerful her Immortality is. For some synergies, Ryde works incredibly well with everyone, and everyone works incredibly well with Ryde. The only Mercenary she doesn't pair well with are defenders, as they cannot receive her Immortality buff, but even still, it's completely fine. For some good matchups, Ryde counters every single Slayer that doesn't have a nullifier. Yep, you heard that right. As long as the ally being attacked has Ryde's Immortality, they will never die. Now to her counters. The best way to counter Ryde is Rogers and Ebony, as they can bestow nullifiers to allies, pretty much making her Immortality useless. Mercenaries that have a nullifier in their base skill kit can technically work, but the problem is that all of them aren't in really a great spot. You're better off using Ruggers or Ebony to bestow a nullifier. Additionally, again, Valtor and Mominier can technically work as they can remove Ryde's Immortality with their nullifier counter, but as I said previously, you're better off using Ruggers or Ebony rather than relying on the enemy to target a very squishy Valtor or Mominier. Helga can also work as a decent counter as her buff prohibition blocks mercenaries from receiving Ryde's Immortality. Furthermore, if Ryde's placed in the skip position, you could use Dalvita Charmer, preventing Ryde from bestowing her Immortality effect to allies. If Ryde is placed in the back position, you can use Claudia's Charm instead. If you don't want to or don't have a specific mercenary to counter her, you can use a Viper spell cut to reduce her AoE tiles, heavily reducing the amount of mercenary she buffs. And lastly, Ryde is very squishy without her Immortality buff, so generally any damage can one-shot her, just don't forget about her counterattack. In my opinion, Ryde's incredibly strong and versatile Immortality makes her work fantastically in both the regular arena and in Guild War. She easily gets an S rank without a doubt. And finally, the most important question of all, should you build Ryde? My answer is hell fucking yeah! I know I keep saying it, but Ryde's Immortality is so goddamn powerful that it's almost always worth running her in any team composition. It doesn't even matter if she's countered by nullifiers or charm effects, the fact that she forces out a response from the enemy already gives her enough value. In conclusion, if you don't have a Ryde, I would highly recommend getting one. And that's all. Make sure you check the comments if I made any changes to this guide, but other than that, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll try my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.